Ever wonder what's behind the mortgage red tape? Let me introduce you to two friends, maybe friends, Freddie and Fannie. Welcome to episode 4 of Inside the Deal Through Michael's Eyes, a fresh take on real estate and business. My name is Michael Renick, and I am your host for this podcast. After a 31-year career, I retired from General Motors at the young age of 52 and moved right into building my real estate career. I currently hold a Florida real estate broker's license, and I focus on servicing Florida's West Coast. This podcast combines both my GM business and real estate experience and goes beyond the surface, offering a candid look at how business should be done right. Whether you're navigating the complexities of real estate or tackling broader business challenges, we want to talk about that. Education is one of our main goals in this podcast. What I'd like to do right now is introduce you to a great mortgage person. Don B is the man I affectionately call the mortgage coach who explains the why. When my clients need a great mortgage person, Don is the only one I refer. Over the years, he has demonstrated the same passion as I have, and that is doing business the right way. As we all know, the mortgage process is a complex one. With an extended partner such as Don, we have someone that guides my clients seamlessly through the process and delivers a quality product each and every time. What I personally like about Don is that he does not offer excuses, but instead works to find a solution, even in the most difficult cases. At the end of the podcast, I'll provide more of his contact information. But Don, welcome. Glad to have you here.
It's good to be here, Mike. Thanks for the invitation.
So you and I have done a lot of videos in the past. We've worked together for, I don't want to say how many years because that might give an indication of how old I really am. So we'll keep that a secret. But this is our first podcast. And what I like to do for those that may be watching the video, many of you will listen to this hopefully, but those watching, we're just setting up a studio for Don. So he will be a part of this going forward, maybe about once a week or so, and we'll get cameras and lighting all taken care of for him. So we're just building this podcast. But I have a philosophy of falling forward. And what I wanted to do is just get this thing off the ground. Don has so much to share. And I can't tell you how many times that he saved a deal that I had going through a tough real estate in our mortgage process, if you would. Don, I don't know how you do it.
Well, 36 years of an education. That's how you do it.
And I know you believe, as I do, the education really is the experience, right? In terms of tackling all these things.
It's definitely the experience, but more importantly, I've been very fortunate in my career to have been able to be involved with not only originations, but underwriting, post-closing, shipping, insuring, secondary marketing. So I have a relatively robust understanding of the entire business from start to finish. And that does help in putting these loans together for sure.
It does. Just a funny story. When I was getting my real estate license, not my broker's license, that came later, but the real estate license, I'm usually very active in the classroom asking questions. I want to know the why. And when the instructor got to the mortgage process, I was silent. And so after a while, he looked at me and says, "Mike, what gives? You're not being as inquisitive." And I says, "I already know everything I need to know about mortgages." And he says, "Is that so?" I said, "Absolutely." He says, "Well, what is that knowledge that you have?" I said, "It's a 10-digit phone number for Don B. He is the guy that knows all this stuff. I'm going to walk out of here today with a high-level, superficial knowledge of the process. But I'll tell you, all the hard work is going to be done by Don." And that's a true story. That's exactly what I shared in that class. There is no way a real estate agent, in my mind, can be an expert in the mortgage process and the real estate business. Would you agree with that?
Oh, and vice versa. A mortgage person can't be an expert in the real estate side either. So it does work hand in hand. There's no question.
So at the top of the show, I talked about introducing my two friends, and that's Freddie and Fannie. And I say that in jest because I'm not sure they're friends of mine, and they're definitely not enemies. But let's dive right into this thing. And Don, please feel free to share from the heart. But maybe we could just start out by saying, who is Freddie and who is Fannie, and what are their origin? What is their purpose, their origins in the housing market?
They're basically government-sponsored enterprises. So you'll hear the term in the news, the GSEs, and that stands for government sponsored enterprise. And what these agencies are basically government agencies. They were created by Congress. The years that this all occurred, I can get in the weeds with all that, but the bottom line is a bank only has so much assets to lend money. They only have so many deposits, and that once those deposits deteriorate or lending stops. So in 1970-ish, maybe it was before that, the government decided that we needed to really help real estate people, help home ownership is really what it was all about. And the only way you can offer home ownership is to offer financing for that home ownership, or else you're paying cash for everything, and how many people can do that? So thus Fannie and Freddie came into existence. Freddie Mac came in specifically for thrifts, the credit unions, the savings and loans. Fannie Mae was brought into existence more for the big banks, the corporations and so on. But they both do the same thing. It's just one caters to one group of lenders or bankers, and another caters to the other group. So that mortgage sponsored enterprise is basically just the government, the United States of America, stepping in and saying, you lend your money, we're going to give you a set of guidelines that everybody has to abide by. Those guidelines then become the gold standard, if you will. And any loan that's underwritten to that standard, you can sell that collateral, in other words, the paper, the actual mortgage itself, to either Fannie Mae or Freddie Mac.
So can I give them credit for the very simplistic, never a hiccup, very simple to walk through approval process?
Yes, you can give them credit for that. And everybody, Mike, think about it this way. Everybody can get on a bike and start to pedal, but not everybody pedals the same way. You might have a 12-foot on a 6-inch pedal. You might have a 3-inch foot on a 6. So there's so many variations to everybody's life that Fannie Mae and Freddie, these guidelines are just that. They're guidelines that you have to try to narrow down everybody's personal life into those guidelines. And that's what makes it complicated.
But why are they so powerful? Sure. All right. So here's what I'm hearing, and you're teaching me a lot. I appreciate this. So they set guidelines and they set standards. So why do I care? Why don't we just go around them and do the right thing for our client?
And you can, but if you're the client, in most cases, or just human nature, I want the best interest rate. I want the best terms that I can get for my mortgage. And where you're going to get those best terms without any question, you're going to get those best terms with Fannie Mae and Freddie Mac, because it is, again, a standard that is, I won't say extremely restrictive, but it's restrictive. Now, if you are not within that set of standards, you can go outside of that. And there are other lenders, other programs, other banks, other investors that will purchase that mortgage, but it's going to be done at a premium. And the premium is in the form of rate and points.
Higher interest rate. So
higher interest rate.
There's the method to their madness by setting these standards. And in some cases, I mean, we could argue they're pretty stringent, because we all know what happened back in 2008 when we were kind of rewriting all the rules, right?
And that's a whole nother topic
We
which
should
is
do a
probably,
video or a podcast on that one time because
uh,
I have this philosophy that if you were my mortgage broker and if you would ask me for one letter in the word mortgage and I got it right, I was approved. Was it that bad back then?
it got again back to the standard. The Fannie Freddie standard got loose, and everybody blames this on a certain channel of business. And it wasn't the channel of business; it was the guidelines that the channels followed that ultimately got us into trouble because they loosened. Mike, there was such a fierce political goal to get as many people into home ownership as they could. They continued to loosen and loosen and loosen the guidelines to a point where they went too far. And in going too far, well, we all saw what happened.
So let me play
That's
this back.
been corrected, by the way.
What's
That's
that?
been corrected, by the way. Fannie's got back to their charter and they're doing things the right way, and lenders are lending basically based on the ability for a borrower to repay.
So actually, a borrower has to be qualified to get a mortgage today, right?
Correct.
So we got to think about coming back and doing a podcast on 2008 and what went wrong because I remember teaser rates and stuff, but we'll put all that aside. So so from a business perspective, a non-technical mortgage perspective, the reason why mortgage folks like yourself, you follow those standards is because ultimately they buy the loan. Is that correct? When you close the loan, let's share with our listeners what happens.
Yeah, there's basically there's a lot of parts to a mortgage, but the actual loan itself, when it's all done, it's packaged and it's ready to be sold, there are basically two parts to the mortgage. There's the collateral. That's basically the instrument that you're lending the money on, that's securing, that's tied to that property. And there's a price that you are paid for that loan. Additionally, you have a second part, and that's the servicing, which most people get confused. They're not all, it's not one and the same. The servicing is it has separate value. In other words, whenever we close this loan, somebody's going to have the rights to collect the interest on that loan for the next 5, 10, 15, 30 years. That's servicing value is a value as well. So technically, from just the trade perspective, what happens is you can sell a loan, service release, or service included. So in other words, whenever I'm selling my loan, I can sell the paper without the servicing, and I can retain the servicing as a lender. And I can earn the interest for the next 30 years. I can also sell that loan, the actual mortgage, and the servicing together, and I'll get a higher premium for that because there's value in both sides, right? So to cut through the chase, Mike, what happens is if I'm a bank, and let's just say it's a round number, and I'm going to lend $100,000. That $100,000 I'm going to fund with my cash. But if I don't get it back, and that borrower holds that mortgage for 30 years, I'm limited to how much money I can lend. I don't care who you are. So consequently, what everybody does, is they take that loan. I don't care how big you are or how little you are. You're selling that loan. Forget about the servicing. You're selling that loan to Fannie or Freddie, which is where you'll get the best execution. And then you're getting your money back so you can lend it again.
So if they didn't exist or you didn't want to sell it to Freddie or Fannie, you had mentioned before there may be some other channels, but that's not where you're going to be able to offer the best deal for the borrower because you're not going to get the best deal when you go to sell that paper.
Actually, it really doesn't matter to the lender. And I don't care what lender it is, because we're generally going to earn In fact, the government has made some restrictions now where a loan is a loan is a loan. I don't care where I sell it. I can't make more money one way or another. So contrary to what people might think, there's no benefit for me to sell your loan into the non-Fannie Freddie market or the Fannie Freddie market because I make the same amount of money either way. There's no benefit for me. My benefit, my value is getting my customer, your customer, the best program that I can get them into, because then I got a customer for life. We got happy people, we get referrals, et cetera, et cetera. So to answer your question, we use those different venues. Fannie or Freddie is the first go-to because they're the best price. After that, then you go to the different entities and there's quite a few, so we won't get into weeds with that. But then you get to the higher and higher and higher interest rates.
So even though, in my mind, the cause of these, the approval process, which is arduous at best. I mean, we've all gone through that, and sometimes it works smooth, sometimes it doesn't. But these standards, there's a method to their madness in terms of making so that when you go to sell the paper, it's a high quality paper. Is that a good way to look at this thing?
It's a AAA bond.
The borrower has gone through excruciating steps to get approved for that kind of stuff.
And you know what, Mike, and this would be a good topic for another day, but the perception, the perception in the industry right now is the mortgage process is so hard. I have to tell you, I disagree. And the reason I disagree is when a borrower makes an application with our team, I don't ask the borrower for a single piece of paper. I want to see what their profile is first. Mm-hmm. Then I'm going to ask them for the information I need to document, or let's call it back up what they're telling me. So basically, the mortgage process, which is Fannie's process, Freddie, any entity, subprime, all day, whatever you want to call it, they have documentation that we have to put in the file, paper in the file that backs up what the borrower says. You never want to call anybody a liar, but anybody can say anything. So I need to validate what you're telling me. And it's that validation process that I think the consumer takes offense to, or is not, or some of the information isn't readily available to them to back up what they're telling me. Like a bank statement. Well, everything's done electronically now. When I ask for bank statements, it blows my mind. People don't even know how to get a bank statement off of the internet because they're not mailed to them anymore. So the process has become arduous, in using your word, because of technology in some ways. Before, we had paper everywhere. Now there's no paper.
Do some of us still use more paper than they should?
I'm one of those people.
Don, I don't have one near the desk. Don carries around the book. I use everything electronically on my smartphone or my laptop, but he's got that damn book. I'm sorry, there's not a better way to say that. So I guess the point is, Mike, this documentation or this validation process, which is what is the guideline, is what ultimately makes the consumer a little ruffled, because they have to supply information to validate what they say. So the cost to the consumer is all of these steps you have to go through, the documentation, the proof, but the benefit back, the revenue, if you would, the benefit back is the fact you get a much better rate. Is that true?
That's 100%. And and that's the other side. If you say, I don't want to give you anything, well, we got loans for that too. It's not the best loan.
That's another podcast we could do.
But you can give me nothing. It's all calculated on FICO score, which is another topic, because there's all these different scoring models, and people tell me what their their telephone tells them that their credit score is, and then when I pull their credit, it's 30, 40, 50 points lower. And that's because the consumer credit report's way different than a mortgage credit report. But that's, again, a conversation for another day.
Okay. So, I prepared some questions. I shared some of them with you. Let me choose a couple of them. I wanted this to be a productive podcast. Do Freddie and Fannie directly or indirectly drive the mortgage rates?
Yes and no. In a free market, when the quote, the Fed isn't manipulating interest rates, the bond market or free trade will drive interest rates. Fannie and Freddie do not do that. The Wall Street does that. Now, everybody remembers the 3% interest rate that everybody wants us to get back to. The only reason we were at 2 and 3% was because the Fed, in other words, our government, artificially deflated the cost of these loans, because what they were doing is, again, the loans were still going to the secondary market, just like they always do. But again, supply and demand, as soon as these loans were hitting the market, the government was buying up all these bonds. So if you buy up all the bonds, what's that do to the price? It pushes the price higher and higher and higher, which pushes yields lower and lower and lower. So consequently, it was artificially creating these low rates. So the answer to your question, Mike, is in a normal market, yes, the Wall Street, the consumer traders, really set where rates will go. Recently, including even today, the Fed's still involved, and rates aren't really moving to where they should be or where they could be, because the Fed's artificially increasing or decreasing interest rates. So I know that's not the answer that we were looking for, but if we get the government out of it, yes.
It's all about truth and transparency. The answer we're looking for is what's really going on out there.
Right now, the Fed's controlling these rates, 100%.
Okay, so let me put you on the spot for a second, and I apologize for doing that. Do you believe that Freddie and Fannie are effectively addressing housing affordability, or is there room for improvement? Interest rates are up, home prices are up. Is there some things that Freddie and Fannie can be doing to help our borrowers with this?
This is probably above my pay scale. However, in my simple mind, if Wall Street is trading at, and let's just use for round numbers, a 7% interest rate is par, and if I want a lower interest rate, I can buy that down through discount points and get down to 6.5 or 3 points. That's fair market. What Fannie and Freddie are doing, and have been doing for as long as I've been 36 years in the business, they have loan level price adjustments, is what they're called. So I'm going to answer your question here in a second, Mike. So Fannie has decided that there's more risk to a borrower with 620 credit score than a borrower with a 740 credit score. So what that Fannie does, and Freddie, is they add a negative price adjustment to that Wall Street price for that poor borrower that's at 620.
Mm-hmm.
The 740 guy or girl gets the rate. Maybe someone's buying a condominium. Depending on how much equity you have in the property, Fannie has decided there's more risk with a condo. Fannie has decided there's more risk on an investment property. Fannie has decided that there's more risk if a borrower puts 5% down compared to 25% down. And I can go on and on and on and on. So there's a matrix, and I mean it's a matrix that you got to run your finger across and down and add up all the adjustments to the base price that you're getting from Wall Street because Fannie said so. So Fannie Mae is in themselves with their adjustments making barriers for borrowers to get into owning real estate because they're negatively affecting their price. Now, is that right or wrong? I'm not here to tell you it's right or wrong. I'm here to tell you that it negatively affects the borrower with the lower credit score, with the borrower putting less money down, with the borrower buying a certain kind of property, et cetera, et cetera.
So go ahead.
But I will tell you this also. They even went as far as to say, and this was back about a year and a half ago, that if a borrower's debt ratio was higher than a certain number, they started negatively affecting that too. And there was let me back up. So what Fannie did is they said, if your debt ratio is below this number, you're good. You're good. If your debt ratio is above this number, you're bad, and we're going to negatively price your loan. Well, what they did is they did it backwards. They said, borrower, if you have a real good debt ratio, in other words, you handle your obligations very well, we're gonna negatively affect your rate so that we can positively affect the rates for the people that their debt ratios are too high. And the market people went crazy saying, why would you pay? So it's the same thing. They try, but no matter what they do, they're going to, the more they try to help, the more they hurt, I guess is where what I'm trying to say.
Here's what you've just proven, and I mean this as a extreme compliment. I'm a genius sometimes, not very often. But about 100 years ago, when I was in my first real estate class, and I told the instructor that I only needed to know the 10 digits. That's your phone number that we see on the screen. I was right, because this is complex. But what I want to do in this podcast, here's my goal. I want to explain why Freddie and Fannie are necessary today. And actually, even though the process to get approved is difficult at best, there's a benefit that come out of this thing. And it's the standardization. Would you agree with that, Don? Put me on the spot if I'm wrong.
100%. But more importantly, Mike, it's the liquidity that they bring to the market. The liquidity, there's no value you can put on the liquidity.
They have all the cash, right?
They got infinite cash. They just keep printing money.
So, I'd like that. That would be good. So, a company like yourself, like your company, you have X amount of funds and you can do this. And like you said at the beginning, if you had to hold the paper, there's a day that those funds are all used up. By being able to sell this, that you
got to wait for something to pay off before you can lend it again.
What I don't want to do in these podcast series is get political. That's not the purpose. It's educational. It's transparency. It's about doing business the right way. But I do want to ask this question if it's fair. Even if it's unfair, I want to ask the question. I'll let you address it. And you and I discussed this last night. There is a rumor that potentially down the road, these two companies could be privatized, is the right word. If that I'm not asking will it happen, but if that happens, is that a benefit to consumers or is that going to be a detriment to consumers? Your opinion.
Well, to answer that, man, I'm not giving you straight answers, and I don't mean to do that, but remember, a government-sponsored GSE, a government-sponsored enterprise, is basically backed up by the government, basically saying that any loan that Fannie or Freddie does, if it goes bad, the government's going to back me up. Well, that put the government in big trouble back in 07, 06, 07 because of how loose guidelines got. But thank God that they were there, or we would have no real estate market right now. Well, that's not fair. We wouldn't be where we are right now with the real estate market because we recover immediately because we had the backing of the government. So that entity has significant value because of that. As soon as once that happened, the government basically took these two agencies into receivership. So right now, Mike, they're not really independent companies anymore. They're in receivership controlled by our government right now. So my contention is, are we better off with the government controlling these two entities as they are now, which they were never supposed to be that way? Or are we better off privatizing it and let fair market manage this? And I'm always, I'm just a fair market guy. I want everything to be fair. So a lot of times when the government's involved, they manipulate things one way or another that's going to benefit their constituency. I mean, it's just the way they get in office. So I don't know that privatizing it is a bad thing. What I'm uncomfortable with is the guarantee, that federal government guarantee with the infinite dollars that they have. That's what we would sacrifice by privatizing it. So
that's the risk associated potentially, and more will come out about this. Again, there's a lot of things talked about. Anytime there's a change in administration, things are going to change in the country, whether it's Republican or Democrat, doesn't matter.
Yeah.
So we have to wait and see right now. So I'm going to ask you a softball question because we've talked about this, and I've done a lot of videos myself on this. Interest rates, where are they headed in 2025? Up or down?
We've been saying for the last 3 years that rates are coming down, haven't we?
We have.
And I'm going to stay on that horse. Where rates are going to come down. How they're going to come down, how quickly, is a whole nother topic. But there is more pressure now, without a doubt, of rates falling than to the upside. That's not to say that we're not going to get a jagged down.
Correct.
But rates are going to get better. It's just going to take, Mike, it may take another year or two. We thought we'd be in the fives by now. It may be another year or two before we get down there.
So time will tell, but the experts, as yourself and many other experts, are projecting rates should come down. Now, I'll throw another softball question at you. And you and I have had many discussions on all of these kind of questions. Should someone wait for the rates to come down, or should they buy now, and why?
Well, I'm just going to use this analogy. If you're thinking of buying a house and rates right now, 6 3/4, 7, let's just say that ugly number, 7%. By the way, when I bought my first house, it was 13%. So 7 really sounds good to me. But let me go on. Sure. If you're on the sidelines right now because you have 7%, how many other people are on the sidelines waiting also because rates are 7%? So I'm answering your question. So let's say rates go to 5.5. Can I qualify for more house? Absolutely. Is my payment going to be better? Absolutely. Is it a better time to buy? Absolutely. What's that going to do to all those people that were on the sidelines? I think it's going to bring them to the market. So my fear is the prices that we are at now, with rates higher, with rates lower, there's going to be pressure to push pricing. Prices are going to raise. So do you want to buy a house today at a really good negotiable price, maybe at a higher interest rate, and be able to refinance later on? Or do you just want to wait for the housing market to heat up, prices to go up, and you pay more for the house with a lower interest rate? You make the call. It's not my decision to make. It's the consumer's decision. I know what I would prefer, what I think is the right, but I'm not the one buying right now.
No, I get that. Don, I want to thank you. We're over the 30-minute mark right now. This is our first podcast together. We're going to work more on the technology for those that are watching the video. Many folks are going to listen to the conversation, but there will be some where the video will be present. We're going to work on all that kind of technology. We're going to come back, you and I, on maybe about a weekly basis, and we're going to talk about all kinds of things. It might be fun to do a podcast on what happened in 2008. I actually had a mortgage person when I was back in Michigan say, Mike, to get this loan, you need to tell me you make this amount of money. Don't need to prove it, but you need to tell me. And I said, well, I don't do business that way because it's not true. But we've got a lot of things we can talk about going forward. Don, is there anything that we've left out, anything you want to wrap up in terms of my two best friends, Freddie and Fannie?
No, they are a necessary evil. We really do need them just for the liquidity. So I'll take the bad over all the good that they provide for sure.
And for those of you either watching or listening, if you didn't understand everything, I didn't either, and that's okay. Don, that's why I use Don. Don is the only mortgage person I use for my clients because he gets the job done. So his phone number's up there. I'll put up a slide with his email address, his website, things like that, so you can reach out. Of course, I'm here for any of your real estate needs, even if it's not the part of Florida that I service. If I can help in terms of opinion, process, things like that, I'm happy to do that. We look forward to doing many of these going forward. Don, I want to say thank you. You took time out of a busy schedule to join me today this is the 4th podcast, but it's the first one I've actually brought in a guest. So thank you.
Look forward to the next one, and happy holidays, Merry Christmas, and everything else.
Same to you, Don. Take care.